If other people would like to add to the story, please feel free to come up and speak.
I didn't expect this quite now, but and it is not a continuation of Jeff's story, but it's a little bit of the history that happened when Lou and I came down for vacation one weekend. This was spring of 1999. And I just found it in the old newsletter, so I'm reading it directly rather than telling the story. It's entitled An Extraordinary Meeting. He stood on a chair, stretching to reach the top of the huge white dry erase board where he wrote agenda. He turned to face the group and he smiled. Okay, item 1. Script, someone said. Item 2. Cite. Item 3. Rules and regulations. Item 4. Marketing. They had all been down this road together before. He continued to number the items until he reached 9. The members present responded, each requesting his or her own topic of expertise or concern. When there were no more agenda items, he turned to the group and said, "How much time do you want to allot for each item? 5 minutes?" Someone said, "Let's just begin and see what it takes. We never stick to the times anyway." He was 9-year-old Jacob Zucker, son of architect Jeff Zucker, designer of Manzanita Village, and he volunteered that day to facilitate, with only an occasional prompt from the membership, the regular meeting of Manzanita Village's co-housing meeting. Now, it was our first live meeting. We had officially joined the group from 1,800 miles away. Milwaukee was our home at the time, and so we were some of the newest kids on the block. We had received the minutes for the last year and had visited our Prescott neighbors for the first time at the Springs groundbreaking up here in '98. And so we had kept up with the progress of the village, but this was our first plenary meeting. It truly opened our eyes to what co-housing could be. An hour and a half later, each agenda item had been checked off. They didn't invent action items back then. And decisions had been made by consensus of the group. The minutes were recorded by a volunteer secretary, and Jake was off playing with his brother Ben and Simon the cat in an adjoining room. Things have improved since then, changed since then, but it was a delightful meeting, our very first.
There's some other stories that people would like to share. We have a lot of stories in this room.
Ben, how did you find the land?
I don't remember.
I think she was talking to Ben Bakke.
That's Ben.
Ben.
Well, we knew they were going to build a senior apartment and a nursing home in the same area, so that'd be good for us.
That's pretty good.
Any other? Oh, yeah.
Reticent group.
Yes.
How about Paolo?
Yeah, how
Paulo, do you have a story for us today?
Thank you for coming down. It's a real treat to have you with us.
For sure.
Some people might not know about it.
Well, did I not introduce guests? I guess I didn't. I guess I forgot that. This is Paul Moore. This is Paolo of the story, Jeff's partner, architect partner.
Hello, everyone. I decided to challenge myself and actually stand up here and start to talk, even though I have no idea what I would say. I am actually am a bit overwhelmed by the presence in the room and just that story that was told, and the vision was there, and just, yeah, that it is reality now. And there's a whole group of people here with a lot of experience about how to live together in a great neighborhood. And I'm just happy to say I had a little bit of part about that. Certainly, happy to say that I was part of the gestational period, and I have a lot of good memories about all the meetings that happened. Somebody give me an idea what else I might or I could just stand there. When Jeff said Paulo, I thought, is he talking about me, or is he talking about our mentor?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so-
How was the craftsman style chosen as the model for the community between you and Jeff?
Yeah, I think it just was a natural fit in terms of finding something. Style for us is often doesn't always have positive connotations, that we don't necessarily like to think that we have a style or creating a style or imposing a style. But the thing about craftsman style is that it has that impression of being, really a quality that you can feel and have hands-on and is comfortable to most people.
Have you done this in other places, or done this before?
I've tried many times, and two groups. I'm up in Flagstaff, and we've had two very serious groups up there, and just kind of have not taken off. So there really is something that this has really come to fruition.
So it has to do with the actual community making it happen. What's the difference between this group?
Yeah.
If we knew? Yeah.
I don't know.
Bottle that.
Yeah, it's just, I don't think it's simple to say. I mean, because what I think about in terms of the groups that, in particular the two in Flagstaff that I've been involved in, those people are now my community in Flagstaff. They're still strong as a group, and I still make that connection with them. But, just not getting over that hurdle of actually physically getting the shovel out or, spending the money. Getting the money thing figured out is hard. And, certainly we could wish that things had been easier in this group, but I think there is something about just having to wade through the difficulties and get it done together somehow.
Okay, you can tell us about your journey in Miller Valley Creek. Then you put on
The dance show.
Oh, yeah, also a part of a dance group that has a collaborative quality to it that's really important to me. And we did one project down in the creek, and where we really inhabited that space and created a place there to end that connection with the nature. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, go right ahead.
I have a story from our formational time, when we would sometimes go to different locations for the variety of being somewhere other than, where were we meeting at that point, who knows? And we took a trip to Sawura, which is the Unitarians' camp area, the Phoenix Unitarian group's camp area that's out in the eastern part of Arizona, south of here. It was a six-hour drive maybe, or 8 hours. And in my car, it was George Primus, myself, Abe Bernstein, and Bobby. And Abe was driving, and he said, I've been giving a lot of thought lately to, he was at Prescott College, and he said, a lot of my students talk about their spiritual lives. And I don't know what they're talking about. What is spiritual life? Anyway, that was what he was working on at that point. And so, knowing that he could probably go on and on and on, I suggested to Bobby that we might each share our spiritual journeys as part of our drive, this long 6-hour drive or whatever it was. So we each took a turn and shared what we considered to have been our spiritual journey. And when we got to Sawura and told the others there that that was what we had been sharing on our drive, a couple of people there said, "Oh, that sounds like a good idea." So around the campfire we shared some more stories. And it was an interesting way to get to know each other on a different level. I'd known George Primus for quite a while then, I think, and a part of him that I got to hear about that I wouldn't have heard otherwise. So there are opportunities in our neighborhood, both in the planning process and in our living together, to share at lots of different levels. And that was one of the ways we shared on that occasion.
When Jeff was talking about two sides of the coin, I vividly remember before we moved down here, and we were still in Milwaukee, Joan and I was quite busy with, I'd just come off a stint with a musical group that we were together 10 years, and we were working like 42 weekends a year, Fridays, and or Saturdays, and before that I was with a group that we were working Friday and Saturday, and I was with that group for about 5 years. So I didn't have very many weekends, but I still wanted to continue my music. So I got in touch with Kathy Nolan before we moved down here, and she knew all the musicians around town, and she had all the connections. And I said, "Kathy, you know, I'd really like to perform when I get to Prescott." She says, "I'll set you up." So she was a marketing manager of this new, I forget the name, it was a bread baking place. Millstone, thank you. The Millstone. And it was over by the railroad tracks, and there were cars on the track, and it was this nice building and whatnot. And so she took me in there, and I met the manager, and she took me to the little stage, and she said, "When you move to Milwaukee, you're assured from Milwaukee, this is where you're going to be performing." And I was all excited. I went back home and I told all the people in Milwaukee, "I already got a job when I get to Prescott." Well, when I got to Prescott, Kathy came up and she said, "Something didn't go too well. The person who was in charge of the Millstone absconded with the money." And so we will be closing down because we're not going to stay open. And that was the other side of the coin. Kind of a little disappointment when I thought I had my job all set and I was ready to go to this neat place, but it didn't happen, but that's okay. Millstone, yes.
Well, I thought I should tell a bit of my story since some people don't know me and I don't know some of them. But some of the things I remember, how I got involved with co-housing was I worked for the people that launched the Great Peace March in 1986. And on the Great Peace March they used consensus. 500 people stuck in the desert with no money and almost no vehicles, and they came to every decision by consensus. After the march, my friend Roberta, who was a marcher, helped to found the first co-housing community in the country in Seattle, Winslow Co-housing on Bainbridge Island. So life happened. I went through a divorce. I had 2 kids, and I decided that the Bay Area was too expensive and I was going to move back to Arizona. And so my daughter and I, who always made decisions by consensus, we had considered moving to Carmel, California, where I was working, another expensive place. And together we decided, no, we want to move to Prescott, which was where my sister had lived. And I grew up in Arizona, so it was time to come back home. So Roberta happened to come here to Arizona to adopt a little baby. And while she was here, she found out there was a co-housing community. Meanwhile, she's living up on Bainbridge Island, another place we considered moving, except for it rains all the time, and I love being outdoors. So Roberta came to Prescott and visited, and Joan and Lou, I know she met you, I don't know who else she met, but she says, guess what, there's a co-housing community in Prescott, and I didn't know whether I fit in a co-housing community or not. I mean, I would have with hers. She was already there and it was all set up, and she was my best friend. By the way, she passed away last year. But, so Roberta told me about it, and I got in contact, I think, with Lou and Joan. And Molly and I came over to visit. And I remember we were in the old common house. This was in I think it was 2000, the year 2000. We came for a visit, and we stayed in the old common house in the guest room. And it snowed that night. Joan remembers this. And I woke up in the morning, and I said, I mean, mind you, I had grown up in the Phoenix area. And I woke up, and I looked outside, and there was snow, and it was March. And I called Joan, I said, Joan, how could there be snow? I didn't hear anything. And she says, you really haven't lived in the cold area, have you? So I guess I learned that snow doesn't make noise when it falls. Very pretty. So anyway, Molly and I decided to, here's the up and down side, we decided to rent in the village. And the house that we were going to rent was sold to somebody, and so all of a sudden we were about 3 weeks away from moving here, and we had no place to live. And Joan and Lou found that there was a little A-frame over there that was for rent, and sight unseen, we decided to take it because it was right next to the village. Well, 3 weeks later, the city sewer backed up into our rental. And it was pretty traumatic because Molly had just left the whole state where her dad was, moved into a new school, started junior high for the first time, another huge change. And I felt that, and she was so traumatized. We moved in with Joan and Lou in their little place, so 2 more people, and didn't we have a dog too? And they had a dog, and we had to kind of keep the 2 dogs separate, but it worked. And anyway, what happened was that Molly was too traumatized to stay in a rental, and we had to buy a house. So we bought a house in Prescott. And we're not here, but I still own my lot. And I don't know what the future holds, but that's why I've been showing my face around again and see if I fit in. And I'm talking to Jeff. Where's Jeff? About building me a greenhouse. Totally.
I have a greenhouse.
Yes. And she needs to tell the story of the greenhouse.
Our next speaker has arrived,
All right.
and I think that's a good time for a break. If
So
you're
that's
finished,
it?
I wanna-
Yeah.